Welcome to Decision Analyst Insider Series webinar and Bigqual overview, focus on large-scale qualitative. My name is Christy Allen. I am the Marketing Director at Decision Analyst and the moderator today. Before I introduce our presenters, I have a few notes for everyone. There is a copy of today's presentation in the handout section available for everyone to download, along with some relevant white papers and case studies. Also, please feel free to ask questions by typing in the chat box. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If we don't answer your question during the webinar, someone will respond to your question within a day or two. Today's presenters are Clay Detloff, Senior Vice President of Insights and Innovation at Decision Analyst. Clay is an experienced market research professional who has been uniting consumer-driven insights with corporate visions for over 25 years. And Bonnie Jansen, Executive Vice President, is co-presenting. She has over 25 years' experience working with companies on branding, new products, and communication and advertising. Many of these products include qualitative research component. And with that, I will hand the presentation over to Clay.
Thank you, Christy, and welcome everyone. Glad to have you here. We've all heard it before. We need to answer a ton of business questions. We have a modest budget. We don't have a lot of money. And of course, we need the answers yesterday. It really has become the new normal. Today, when we're talking to our clients, we hear things like, oh, I need a disaster check. We have to fail fast. We're going with it next month and anything will help. We just need some kind of ideas what the customer thinks. Today, we're really going to be talking briefly about a way to help move forward in today's environment. First, we're going to talk about what Bigqual is and then show you a few examples of its use by looking at online retail perceptions and behaviors. Earlier in the year, again, I had a client and we were talking about promotions and they said, we're going with this in a couple of weeks. That's where we're going. We have to move that quickly. And then they made a comment and there's like, it'd be great to know a little bit about what the customer thinks before we make that move. And that's really kind of the key piece or key reason for this Bigqual. Bigqual is with any other consumer insights or analytical tools. It's not the silver bullet. It's not going to answer all the questions, and it's not going to be appropriate for every business situation. Bigqual, though, does sit at this intersection, at this juncture, if you will, of perspective and speed. It's conducted online, enabling us to pull from a national audience to give insights to our clients in a quick manner, in a way that they feel good about moving forward with decisions that you always have to make. Generally speaking, when you think about getting the customer's perspective, these Bigqual sessions, they can run anywhere between 50 to 300 people, with a typical session going to be around 100 to 150. From a speed point of view, a Bigqual engagement can be conducted in as quick as 5 days, from pulling the trigger to the report, though that time may increase based on the complexity of the issues. Helping to cover this white space is really due to three components or pillars. There's our online panel, there's cutting edge technology, and then there's this appropriate methodologies. Really, if you think about it, the online panel enables us to quickly gather insights from consumers. We've put processes in place to quickly screen, recruit, and get consumers into the research. Whether you need customers, non-customers, old, young, male, female, we're able to really get them in and into a system very quickly. For some of the studies, we'll actually use our articulators panelists. And these articulators are an online panel. They're made up of individuals who've been identified through previous research as being articulate and expressive, and really kind of aware of their emotions and motivations. If an unusually aware and articulate participant is identified during any qualitative project that we do, we kind of invite them to join these articulators panels. And that's a benefit really because, the way to think about qualitative is in a one-on-one situation, the moderator has all of the control. They're kind of able to probe and pry and push a little bit to get the responses from a respondent. When you go into a focus group, for example, the moderator loses some of that control. They're not able to kind of probe in depth as much as they would in a one-on-one, and they more often have to take what the respondent gives them and move forward with it. When you're thinking of a sample size of 50 to 300, that lack of control from the moderator even increases. So what we found is these articulators in many ways are able to kind of help ensure that we're getting good results from the study. In addition to having our own panel, the Bigqual platforms use artificial intelligence or machine learning, to enable quicker analysis of the input. And this is not only during the session itself, but at the very end, it enables us to quickly get out the results. So again, if we're thinking kind of a typical 5-day session, on a Tuesday or Wednesday, we run the session, for example, and by Friday, you've got some results for you. And finally, we know that every methodology, whether it's traditional or it's online, has strengths and weaknesses. There's no, golden bullet for platforms. So we have a pool of different types of platforms that we use to be able to pick the most appropriate platform for our clients' needs. And now I'm going to turn the time over to Bonnie to talk about some ways to bring this Bigqual to life.
Thank you, Clay. Thanks everyone for joining us. The keys to success for Bigqual, as we have seen it in working with our clients, is to make sure that our objectives are very targeted. It really needs to be something that's pretty simple. If you have a project or a situation where you really need to understand in-depth path to purchase and branding and product performance and other issues all at the same time, and you're trying to deal with 2 or 3 different things, it will be difficult to accomplish that in a Bigqual online with this methodology. The other objective and the other thing that really helps this project be successful is having a readily identified sample. So whether it's a high incidence target consumer or whether it's pre-identified sample that you have from some other source, if it's a customer list or database that you have identified, then those will be readily available and quick to get out to the discussion. In addition, the discussion guides are a little less flexible once the research begins than a traditional qualitative project. So it's ideal for qualitative topics that maybe don't involve as much probing and clarification on the back end and follow-on questions, just because it does move very quickly. The internal client teams also have to be prepared for this type of project in a sense that the review and approval of screeners and discussion guides are going to happen very quickly. And so we need to hold some times on their calendar during the course of this 5-day period at those critical points to make sure they're available. And then the other aspect is making sure that we have all the stimuli ready to go at the beginning, at the kickoff of the project. And of course, it can always go longer than 5 days, but we're trying to kind of set up a 5-day schedule, which is typical. And then, of course, if we need a few more days to get materials together, then it just ends up being 8 days. So as we've said before on Bigqual in terms of summary, it is this intersection of both perspective and speed. It's a group of methodologies and that are best suited when we're trying to understand the consumer, the user, and we just need to make sure we get the in-depth understanding and we need to move quickly. So it provides some depth in the quantitative numbers. Again, as Clay mentioned, we might be looking at 100 to 150 people. And it also allows you to do some geographic representation. So if you need to get some northern and southern or different regions, east, west coast, you can easily do that. Whereas if you were doing a traditional focus group, that would be very difficult and more expensive. In addition, the reporting that comes out is a nice combination of both qualitative, motivational type information in the report as well as some quantitative charts. So it has a great combination of those two things. So it moves quickly, and as I mentioned, a large number of participants. You can get geographic representation. It allows this free response input from the consumer. So these are not previously coded or predetermined answer choices. And once they have those choices and they're mentioned, then the group of consumers vote on them. So they get to vote, and you get a sense of consensus and what's an outlier and what's the mainstream feeling. And you also can share visual stimuli, and they can share it back with us. So a few of the solutions, and again, we would help, our experts here would help you decide whether Bigqual is in fact a good solution for your situation at all. And then if it is, then looking at the different components or the different types of Bigqual that can be provided. So if you find that your target group of respondents cannot be available at the same time on the same day, then the quick group, which is most similar to a 1-hour focus group, is not going to be workable for your situation. So in that case, maybe quick thoughts, the one that's more of a text conversation, would be the best solution. If you have a group of consumers or your target audience happens to be very comfortable sharing videos and imagery, then that might be best for the quick share, which is a little bit more like an Instagram or a Snapchat. So again, once we know more about what your objectives for the research are, your target audience, and also your client team, we can make the best recommendation in terms of methodology or combinations of those methods. And Bigqual can stand alone in terms of answering some of your issues, or it may be something that's a precursor to another piece of deep dive research, whether qualitative or quantitative.
Yeah, I think, Bonnie, one of the things that I like about it is that, if you need everybody to come in at one central time and together, you have the ability to do that. Right. If there are times when they need to come over the course of 2 or 3 days at their own convenience, we have an option that fits that too. So, maybe not only need a 10-minute engagement, at their own convenience when they're shopping or when they're going to have a few minutes on the side. So I think the nice thing is throughout the different platforms, the different methodologies, we're able to kind of really fit what you need to have.
Yeah, so we can customize that much like we do with the discussion guide. We're customizing the methods to who you're trying to target and what your objectives are for this research.
Yeah, and again, across all of them, it gives you that, as you mentioned, that really verbatim responses, that customer insights, but it also gives you that directional insights because of the numbers that we're talking to, that you feel fairly comfortable making a decision when you need to.
Right. So now for the really fun part, we get to look at some results, which we all really love. As an overview, we did this project as research on research, so we could share the results with clients. And so we covered topics such as shopping brick and mortar, shopping online or apps. We also looked at shopping for groceries, meal kit delivery, and restaurants. And we know that a lot of those are kind of hot button issues. Go ahead, Clay.
Okay, and just to start, we're going to talk, when we think about online retail, it's a crazy world right now, to be quite honest with you. We have, online companies, organizations looking to get into more traditional brick and mortar. We've got your traditional brick and mortar trying to figure out this online world that everybody's involved in. And so what we did was, as we started talking to people, we said, let's start off with kind of the brick and mortar world that we're familiar with. And so, one of the things we asked is really, what are the advantages of brick and mortar? And some of the top responses that came out, and you will often have seen this in other research, and I think that's in a way very good because it kind of validates the methodology that you can get the answers that you need in this kind of a format. So they talk about seeing, touching, and trying product. That's why I want to be here. We were doing a study recently, and we were talking about carpet, for example. And the respondents were talking about how you can't really see the plushness online. You really can't see how thick it is. It's hard to visualize what a half inch is, what a quarter inch is, what an inch is. And so there was a feeling that, specifically in the carpet area, that it was great to be able to see, touch, feel, even put your feet down on that carpet. There's the idea about immediate gratification. You know what? There's no waiting or shipping. If I want to walk in with it, if I want to walk in, I'm going to walk out with it. And then the feeling of no guesswork, especially when you're thinking about sizes and things like that. I can try it on, I can use it, make sure it works, and it really takes out a lot of that guesswork. When you think about what people want, these were kind of the key things that came up as far as buying in person. One of the things that we did was we can use these methodologies for understanding the shopper's journey or path to purchase. And we can do this in both the online world as well as the in-person world. And Bonnie mentioned one of these methodologies we have is what we call quick share. And this was an opportunity that we had to have people go to, their retail establishments and kind of map their journey, map a shopping trip, for example. And this is just one call out, if you will, of the insights that we got. They can really provide a great reality check for retailers. For example, in this exercise, we had a consumer take pictures of their journey, and they made just little comments on it. Again, kind of almost like an Instagram aspect. The compilation of these snapshots can really provide that quick understanding of all the issues, both positive and negative, that the consumers are going through. So, for example, here you see the respondents were going to a grocery store to get some chips and salsa for the game. Their first thing was to get the chips, and the comment was, I got the chips first, and I always go organic. Following in that journey, they were looking for fresh salsa. And they start with onions and tomatoes to make that salsa and to get it ready to go with the chips. Interestingly enough, this was kind of a fun aside, if you will. They said they saw some salsa on the shelf, and their thoughts were, well, how much easier is that going to be to have it off the shelf versus being in the going through the process of making it. Interestingly enough, their final pick was, they said they saw this salsa in the cold section. You know what? And it's a winner. It's the best of both worlds. It was kind of almost homemade, if you will, but still it was in a jar, and they didn't have to go through that process of making it. So again, this was just kind of a fun example of one of the journeys that came out through those exercises. Now I'm going to turn the time back over to Bonnie and let her tell a little bit more about getting specifically into that online world.
Thanks, Clay. Of course, now we all want salsa, but we're trying to get back to focusing on the best and worst of online shopping and purchasing. We asked consumers to explain to us kind of what were the, again, best winners and the bad things about the online experience. And obviously, convenience and variety, ease, and instant and fast reviews came up very high as the positive things that they experienced. And again, this is just a very general question we asked about all online shopping, not a specific category. And what was also interesting is that when we asked about the negatives, then overwhelming came up, and you can't try on. Of course, I think you would expect the I can't try on. It's a little surprising about the overwhelming aspect, I think. But again, the trade-off of having all that variety and all those choices means it can be overwhelming at times. And so sometimes, depending on what product category you're in, I think consumers are overwhelmed. Other negatives were mentioned was the ads that come up. So, and whether they could trust. And of course, an aspect that has always been an issue for online shopping is, how do I return it if I didn't like it? So.
Okay, so let me share an overwhelming personal story here. This happened at Christmas, and I have grandkids that are spread all across the world, and so we do a lot of online shopping for them for their Christmas presents. And so I was online trying to search for presents for a girl 5 to 8 years old, kind of a thing, and the amount of gifts that were visible and that came up were, for me, were overwhelming. It was just pages and pages and pages. And I ended up going through about the first 5 or 6 pages, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. So we just went to the store. I said, I got to go to the store and just get my hands on it. Give me a narrower set. So I went to the store, found 5 or 6 things that I thought, okay, this is cool. Went back to the house and made the order online. So I can definitely see that overwhelming aspect.
And I think a lot of consumers feel that way, regardless of what product category they're in. But this may be crying out that Clay needs a personal shopper too. I'm not sure. So, in terms of buying in person, when we try to understand consumer behavior and how people feel about things, it's always very interesting to ask, what would they never do? So in our case, in this research, we asked, what would you never buy online? So buying in person is just always going to be preferred. And you can see the results were primarily expensive items, big tickets, car, jewelry, furniture, diamonds, shoes, appliances. Now, shoes, I'm not quite sure why they're there. And there have been a long-standing, very successful set of businesses that do shoes online. But you can just see the differences in terms of the kinds of products that people typically buy online versus these more expensive ones. Um, in addition, there are companies now that are doing just these very same products, and you can get a mattress online and a lot of other things online. So it is doable, but it's interesting. This is certainly a testament to how difficult or what the resistance in the market is currently to those kind of high ticket items.
And one thing that was interesting too was talking to some people about the changes in buying behaviors that it's actually made. And so was talking to someone, and what they actually do is they buy about 3 shirts online, and with the intention that they're going to be returning a couple of those shirts and keeping the one they want. So where in a traditional brick and mortar, you don't really have that in practice, but it really has changed buying behaviors in the online world to some instances.
And I know, Rent the Runway is a great way to get clothing, and you can and they typically you pick out your design, you pick out your color, and you get 2 sizes because you can frequently be wrong about these things. So they automatically ship you 2. But so those are very good comments. Online shopping, again, in terms of activities and perceptions, we just wanted the consumers to talk us through what they typically do. And so they are going, and usually they're starting with a Google search, or maybe they're on Amazon and they're searching for the product. So they're trying to identify, much like Clay was talking about with the Christmas gifts, what product, what brand, kind of get me into a set. But once that decision is made, there's a whole nother section of decisions being made around the pricing. And it's looking for discounts, checking pricing, looking for sales, looking at shipping cost, and comparing all of those. One aspect I didn't mention but should have is checking reviews. Right after a person typically finds a product or 2 that they're interested in, the consumer reviews is a huge asset to being able to shop online. And in fact, even people in a brick and mortar sense sometimes want to pull up and look at reviews of products online so that they can get a sense of how successful this product has been for people in their situation.
Next, we just want to talk a little bit about some of the devices used most often. And really, it boils down to 3 devices. You have your computer, you have your phone, and you have a tablet. And we asked people specifically, and again, this was across all categories, but we asked them what devices they used most often. First, when they are searching for items, and then second, when they are actually making a purchase. And what we found is computers are still kind of used most often for searching. About 50% of the searching is done with a computer. About 33% of searching is done on a phone, and about 18% or so is done on a tablet. Interestingly enough, people are purchasing more on their computer. So even though they may have searched on their phone or on their tablet for an item, more of the purchasing is going back to the computer. And it's still done on phones and tablets, but people kind of talked about they like the computer because it's easier to navigate. It's easier to see images. Frankly, I'm there a lot, but it seemed that the computer screen, just by being bigger, it made it able to see the more detail around the products that or services that they were going to be able to get, and it made sure that they didn't miss anything that was going to be important, whether it was in a specification. It was just easier to make sure that you're making the right decision when you're using that computer screen. Kind of along with that, and again, we've done for the purposes of this, we've just asked where they go for information gathering and purchasing. And again, this was a very broad stroke, if you will. We could have delved specifically into a category. We could have delved specifically into gathering information or purchasing information. But we just kind of took a wide stroke, if you will. And far and above, Amazon and Google are the two places that respondents mentioned going most often for their gathering and purchasing. You can see that Walmart, Etsy, for those who are kind of into the crafts and buying things like that, and Target are kind of a secondary level, if you will. And then the other places they go for gathering and purchasing were very, very small. So again, and I think as you read other sources and as you're familiar with the market, it makes sense. Amazon, Google is where everything is happening, or where a large amount of things are happening. But there are inroads that are being made in other areas and by other organizations. Next thing, again, is just kind of looking at shopping behavior by gender. And what we see is there's a gender difference. Men tend to be either all on board or not really on board at all. So about 53% of men reported that they buy 20% or less, and a lot of that was zero online. And then there's kind of a bubble, and when it comes back up to about 61 to 80%, about 35% of the men buy a good bit online. Whereas for the women, it's more spread out. The lowest is 0 to 20, about 9%, but there's a big bubble at 43%, and 30% from 21% to 60% of the purchases are bought. By over 70% of the women are buying a lot of product online. But it seems like they're probably making some decisions one way or the other in different aspects. Again, this was just a broad stroke, but one hypothesis could be that the females could be shopping more categories. They theoretically have more opportunity to purchase online or at a higher rate or percentage. But again, this gives a good broad swath. We could have gone within this to be more specific, or as Bonnie mentioned earlier, it could be the precursor, more of an exploratory look that would be followed up by more in-depth, either quantitative or qualitative research.
Right, and as Clay mentioned, the women may be shopping more product categories, and part of that may be that in many cases they are shopping for many members of the household. So they may be shopping for the children and themselves and their husband, and so yeah, they're the ones doing the shopping. But it does appear that they're a little more on board with the whole concept.
Very good, thank you. And earlier we talked about an example where kind of the quick share, where consumers shared their pictures with us. The other opportunities that you have in these techniques are to share images with them. And a lot of times we will share stimuli, and it could be concepts, it could be ads, or whatever. This is a projective technique that we use quite often, both in online work as well as traditional work, when we just ask them to pick a picture that best represents the way they think and feel about purchasing. And as Bonnie mentioned, this was specific to health and beauty products online. Again, health and beauty products entails a large group of products and categories, but we did narrow it down a little bit for this. And you can see the images on the left-hand side that were given to the consumers, and they were asked to pick the two that best represents the way they think and feel about purchasing these health and beauty products. And the two that really rose to the top were U and L on kind of the lower left-hand side and SY on the top right-hand side. And it was kind of interesting when we talked in this category. We've done this kind of technique in a lot of different categories, but these two, I want to say, rose to the top a lot more than they have in other categories. It kind of seemed to be a little bit more polarizing, if you will. So SY, when people were picking SY, they were talking about it's the balance in getting great product at a great price. It's the way I want to feel after I use the products. And just again, these products make you feel good. When they were talking about UL, it was kind of something more about the actual task of shopping off. And it was, I'm getting something done. It's quick. I know the results. There's success. And so the SY a lot of times was more about the product, the benefits of the product, whereas the UL became more that kind of shopping process that came through. So again, just an example of the ability to share stimuli, and again, these stimuli could be concepts, it could be ads, both static images as well as videos.
And before we leave this, I guess I will mention that occasionally clients will ask us, what does the SY, the UL mean? And these are just arbitrary letters that are there. So don't lose your mind trying to figure out or decode what those things mean. So the next topic that we talked to the consumers about were restaurants, and a lot of restaurants have online apps, and of course there are a lot of other kind of general restaurant apps that you can put your restaurant or quick serve QSR on. And so we asked specifically about those, and the majority of consumers have ordered from a restaurant online or through an app. And this would also include at-home pizza delivery. So, if you did that, that would also count. But what's interesting is that even though a majority, 81%, had done it, only 12% currently have a restaurant app that they regularly use, or that is an app from a specific restaurant. So what's interesting about that is that if you're investing a lot of money in building an app for your specific restaurant, it may be better, you may be better served to put that money and endeavor in putting together the better visuals and the better content that would go on a more generalized app, something like a Grubhub or an Uber Eats or whatever the groups of those are. So anyway, it's just interesting that consumers had that change in there. The other thing we asked about was what would make up the perfect restaurant app? What would consumers suggest? And so the making reservations, showing me the menu, prices and pictures, coupons, and tracking orders, a reward system, easy interface. And in terms of quotes, we actually saw, again, showing me available seatings and times, giving me the full menu pricing, easy to navigate, and keeping track of my favorites. Those were the most common things. And again, pictures of food is always really critical in terms of restaurants, which everybody knows. But in terms of anything that's technological, that easy interface and something that's intuitive is also really critical.
Great. Thank you, Bonnie. And just kind of in wrapping up, we wanted to mention some of the different ways, as you can see here, that we found that these large-scale qualitative studies can be useful. Product and service concept, reactions and improvements. The brand image research, package design work has been very successful. Store redesign or reset reactions, communication platforms, ad or copy reactions, shopping and decision journey exploration. And it's a combination of understanding what the goals are, kind of what area that you need to be in, that really kind of, again, determines the best way forward, and what's the best and most appropriate methodology that will give you the answers. As Bonnie mentioned, some of the methods are more in depth. A 1 hour real-time, focus group, if you will. We're able to get a lot more information, a lot more deeper insights than kind of a 10-minute variation where they're kind of coming in at their own convenience and responding and answering questions, and giving their verbatims that way. As we mentioned before, this methodology really works best if you have some specific or targeted objectives. And if you need multiples of those to be addressed at the same time, there may be another more in-depth qualitative or quantitative option. Again, a targeted objective really works best, specific objectives. You know, just in closing, we found that Bigqual to fit many of our clients' needs when quick insights are critical and when the alternative is often no insights at all. Bigqual provides that combination again of that perspective and speed. It enables you to get those insights that and enough insights to help you make decisions and to feel good about the decisions that you're making. It is a series of methodologies that are best suited when you need a user or customer's perspective and when we need in-depth insights or understanding and we have to move quickly. Finally, both Bonnie and I, as well as the team here at Decision Analyst, appreciate your attendance in this and hope you were able to get some insights from it.
So I am looking as we start to see if there's questions from the group and anything you want to ask, whether we answer it now or answer it later. We'd love to see your reactions and questions. We do have one question about what are the best use cases for Bigqual. We mentioned a few, but what do you think, Clay, of the things we've done?
I think really one of the sweet spots is this idea of kind of concept testing, whether it's a new product or an ad concept or a marketing concept. It's really because that concept, it gives the respondent something to react to. And because it's in a way qualitative in nature, you're able to also kind of refine and tweak and even retest, with another group or at a different time if you need to. I think it's also been very helpful, and you mentioned this, Bonnie, when you have, you may have a lot of variability in the geography. If you need north and south, or maybe multiple geographies that you want to understand, instead of doing 2 focus groups in one city and 2 focus groups in another city, you're really able to get 100, 150 people across the country that can give you some insights.
And the other thing that we've noticed here in working with our clients is that you may have a corporate culture in some instances where they are more comfortable with the larger numbers. And so there are certain companies that they really do need that in-depth motivational knowledge, but they're just a little uneasy with 2 focus groups or 4 focus groups, as Clay mentioned. So for some corporate cultures, this is a really great fit versus an in-person qualitative. We also just had another question about pricing and kind of what the implications are for pricing, Clay.
And a good way to kind of, I think, about this is if you think about doing focus groups over 2 different cities, and doing 2 to 3 focus groups within each city, the price, which is going to give you, 40 to 60 respondents, the price is very close in that ballpark of doing 100 to 50 respondents using this methodology. So again, it gets specific. It's hard to be, very specific without knowing the details, but just kind of as a general range, we found that to be kind of about an equal trade-off.
Okay. And also about the articulators, can you maybe talk a little bit more about those?
Yeah. One of the things that we have is what we call these articulators, and it's people who have been in our panel but have been identified again as kind of being able to express themselves very well. Right now, I think there is somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40,000, I think, is really about where we are. People that have been kind of tagged, if you will, as being articulators. And they're not needed for every project, but they are able to be brought in and incorporated in as necessary and as needed into these groups. And again, it's one of those things where it helps to overcome that barrier of being able to probe, again and again, like you can get in a one-on-one situation.
Another very good question we just had was, do testing groups need to be homogeneous? And we've done this in the past where we maybe had six, a typing tool. There were six segments, and we had six segments of people. You can definitely test, but the question, basically, the discussion guide was more universal across the six. It's not like you can get super specific into segment one and have a completely separate discussion guide.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Basically, a good way to look at it is we can, in the analysis aspect of it, we can pull out differences and by each segment, user group, age, however we want to do it. But you're really not able to ask different questions of the respondents during the course of the interview. So if you have two different lines of questioning that you want to ask, you're best to break it out and do two rooms, if you will, for a lack of a better word, or two different groups for lack of a better word. Again, asking the questions is not really very well in this, but analyzing comes out very easily.
So it's easy to analyze the different segments with one discussion guide, but if we have two really different groups and we need two discussion guides, then we're going to need two separate rooms, essentially.
Yes.
The other question that we have, or another one, is about how the testing was done. And in the results that we shared with you today, we actually used all three of those component methodologies that we showed up front, the quick share, the quick test. So we did all of those three, and then we just kind of used them and intermingled the results as we shared. Do you want to talk to that a little more?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. We kind of wanted to highlight that there are different methodologies to use and different platforms that can be used. And so we across all of the platforms, we were asking really kind of the same lines of questioning about, or not lines of questioning, but using that same category of that online and retail. Right. And so it enabled us to kind of help tell the story in the groups today.
And I think there may be one other question. So in the quick share, can the respondents share both photos and videos back with us? Our example happened to be static pictures. We had the imagery.
Yes.
But they can share both video and actual images.
Yeah, right? as well as just text comments, right. Also.
And I believe if you guys have other questions, feel free to ask and we'll respond to those separately. But I believe that's all the questions I see. So I'm going to hand the presentation back over to Christy.
Thank you for attending today's Insider Series webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to email Clay or Bonnie. Our next Insider Series webinar will be held in May. Be sure to go to our website to sign up for our free email newsletter to keep informed of our latest blogs, videos, and webinar announcements. In the meantime, have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.